Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Alain, de cette présentation et surtout de votre invitation à cette prestigieuse tribune. Depuis bientôt 35 ans, le Conseil des relations internationales de Montréal contribue à faire rayonner le caractère unique de cette grande ville cosmopolite et de notre immense pays dans le monde entier. Pour tous ceux et celles qui s'intéressent chez nous aux grands mouvements qui redessinent notre monde, je ne doute pas que c'est aussi un instrument précieux d'information, de réflexion et d'analyse. Et un lieu de rencontre sympathique, semble-t-il. Je remercie donc chaleureusement les organisateurs de cette rencontre de me fournir l'occasion de formuler certaines considérations sur la politique étrangère qui va guider le parti que je dirige au cours des prochaines années. Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, in a relatively short period of time, the world has become a very different place. Shortly after Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister in 2015, he proclaimed, quote, "Canada is back." Now, this was widely and rightly criticized at the time. Our armed forces had just spent a decade in Afghanistan, and we were at the moment he spoke those words, fighting against genocidal terrorists in Iraq and Syria. Canada had carved out a reputation as a principled and consistent defender of humanity, boldly confronting injustice and tyranny, and promoting human rights, democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. Canada had, in fact, not gone anywhere. And the profound arrogance of Mr. Trudeau's words foreshadowed how the new Prime Minister would conduct Canada's foreign affairs, with style over substance. And they demonstrated a fundamental unseriousness and misunderstanding of the important office that he had reached. Being a good ally and contributor on the world stage requires more than just talk. Both our allies and adversaries respect strength and confidence. We have seen serious mistakes over and over again from this government, and they are almost always attributable to Mr. Trudeau's poor judgment. During the negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, he was a complete no-show for a very important meeting. Observers said at the time that, quote, the Japanese were seething about what they perceived as a last-minute betrayal by Prime Minister Trudeau. But that was just the preliminary event to what is now known as the most disastrous foreign trip by any Canadian Prime Minister. We all know the details of his trip to India, so I won't go into them here. But what's perhaps less known is just how seriously it hurt Canadians. Bilateral trade with India totals about $9 billion annually, and Trudeau's India trip seriously set us back in terms of helping Canadians benefit from increased trade. As former Liberal Cabinet Minister Ujjal Dosanjh stated, quote, "It's disappointing that the Canada-India relationship could have gone to the next level, but we bungled it." More recently, we have witnessed total disarray in how this government has handled China's completely unwarranted and arbitrary detention of 2 Canadians, and China's totally unjustified trade actions directed against Canadian farmers. Quand Justin Trudeau était candidat, il a fait état de son admiration pour la dictature de base de la Chine. Ainsi, il a détourné le Canada de nos alliés démocratiques traditionnels dans l'espoir naïf qu'un pays communiste aux valeurs incompatibles devienne soudainement un proche allié. Ça n'a pas marché. Il continue à tenter d'amadouer la Chine et d'ignorer la menace qu'elle pose pour la sécurité du Canada. Aujourd'hui, le Canada n'a pas d'ambassadeur à Beijing. Après que l'ambassadeur précédent, nommé par partisanerie libérale, a été congédié pour inconduite grave, et le gouvernement n'a toujours pas de plan pour faire revenir ces Canadiens au pays et contrer les tactiques d'intimidation de la Chine. Closer to home, Canadians had to accept a worse deal on NAFTA after this government's negotiating team turned critical trade negotiations into a parade of photo ops, sound bites, and in some cases orchestrated media leaks. For him, all the world's a stage, and the rest of us merely players in his act. L'approche de M. Trudeau face aux États-Unis et à la Chine illustre parfaitement la politique étrangère de ce gouvernement. C'est le symbolisme avant la substance. Il ne s'agit pas de défendre les intérêts ou les valeurs du Canada. Il s'agit d'utiliser la politique étrangère comme un outil personnel sans produire réellement de résultats. Le Canada et les Canadiens en souffrent. Les Canadiens payent pour les erreurs du Premier ministre et son manque de jugement. Le Canada va réinventer les liens que nous avons avec nos alliés depuis des décennies. Nous devons le faire afin de cerner et de confronter les menaces pour nos intérêts nationaux et nos valeurs. Et nous devons affirmer notre souveraineté, compter sur notre propre force et non pas seulement sur les alliances traditionnelles forgées dans le passé. In the 20th century, Canada was part of a global alliance of like-minded nations, which defeated fascism and communism. Now, some at the time wanted Canada to be part of the non-alignment movement, to not side with tyranny, but also to not side unequivocally with the forces of freedom. Some Canadian leaders harbored secret admiration for authoritarian figures like Fidel Castro or Mao Zedong. Thank goodness that, for the most part, Canada remained on the side of freedom. The threats we face in the 21st century may have different names, but we are having similar debates about how we engage with them. Some would continue to prefer to see Canada take a non-alignment posture, treating democracies and dictatorships in equal and similar fashion. But as Prime Minister, I will firmly reject that pretension that Canada could or should be neutral on the big questions of our time, or fail to work strategically with our allies to advance the space for freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. The threats we face today are very different from those we faced in the 20th century, and in some ways they are more complex. But the solution still involves meeting them with strong partnerships of like-minded and confident nations, devoted to the protection and advancement of our values. These partnerships must expand to involve more and closer cooperation with like-minded nations in Asia, Africa, and South America. Canada's participation in this vital work of expanding the sphere of democracy and expanding cooperation among democracies is indispensable. We are a diverse country with strong people-to-people ties all over the world, and we have historically been respected and trusted, seen as a nation which engages in order to advance principles, not out of narrow self-interest, but for a desire to make the world a better place for everyone. Now, we lack the baggage inevitably associated with superpower status, and we do not have a colonial history beyond our own borders. And we are a member of all the most important international organizations. We can play a vital leadership role building the new international political infrastructure for the advancement of freedom and human rights in the 21st century. In the 21st century, some politicians want Canada to be the referee. I want Canada to be on the starting line. Une nouvelle ère de rivalité et de concurrence idéologique est à nos portes. Il existe des orbites basées sur des valeurs fondamentales. D'un côté, les démocraties libres, pays de libre pensée et de marché libre, respectueux des lois ici et à l'étranger. Et de l'autre, il y a les régimes impérialistes, despotes et corrompus qui veulent déstabiliser l'ordre international fondé sur des règles. Le Canada doit soutenir ceux qui chérissent la liberté, la démocratie, les droits de la personne et la primauté du droit. La Russie sous Vladimir Poutine ressemble de plus en plus à l'ancienne Russie impérialiste. Et la Chine, sous le président Xi Jinping, affirme sa nouvelle influence économique et géopolitique et renforce sa résolution à dominer le XXIe siècle. Au milieu des menaces auxquelles nous sommes confrontés, nous devons appeler nos alliés à rester unis dans nos valeurs communes. Les États-Unis réévaluent de plus en plus leurs alliances traditionnelles et se désengagent, à un certain degré, du monde. Mais si des arguments isolationnistes ont gagné du terrain aux États-Unis, de telles positions ne font pas obstacle à l'engagement mondial de la Chine et de la Russie. Nous devons encourager tous nos alliés à rester déterminés et à continuer à travailler ensemble. La division et le désengagement nous rendent tous plus vulnérables. Mais si nous appelons nos partenaires à rester déterminés dans leurs engagements mondiaux, nous devons également faire notre part, à tous les égards. De nombreux libéraux aimeraient mieux réduire notre soutien à nos forces armées et compter plutôt sur d'autres pour notre sécurité. Mais ce n'est pas la façon de faire au Canada. Depuis plus de 100 ans, notre pays est prêt à faire face à la lourde tâche de défendre ses valeurs. Nous l'avons fait à la crête de Vimy, en Afghanistan, et nous devons le faire encore. At this point, I'd like to drill down a bit further on some of the threats we face. Obviously, there are many issues facing the world that Canada needs to approach with global cooperation. Issues such as climate change cannot be tackled by one country acting alone. Canada must continue to work with international allies across the world, those that are willing to take up the heavy responsibility of ensuring that we pass on a planet cleaner and greener than the one we inherited. Those are things I will address as well in my upcoming speech on our environmental plan. I look forward more to expanding on that. But I wanted to address it today in the context of foreign affairs because it is an issue that does truly need global cooperation. In today's geopolitical climate, there are some clear threats to Canada's place in the world. The rise of China, the reemergence of Russia's Cold War mentality, and states who export terrorism and extremism are just some of the foreign threats to Canadian security and prosperity in the 21st century. With respect to China, first and foremost, Conservatives celebrate the contribution of Chinese Canadians, many of whom came here precisely to leave behind the political system they face at home. And we recognize that the government of China does not represent its people, and that is, in fact, the precise problem. Canada should engage with the Chinese government, but engage in a way that seeks to advance our values and our interests. We should engage in a way that recognizes how our values and our interests are in many respects incompatible with those of the Chinese government. For decades now, many in Canada have looked to China as a way of diversifying our export markets. But in recent years, it has become clear that China's adversarial approach to Canada and the Western democratic world has changed those expectations. And this is deeply disappointing, especially when you consider how just 20 years ago, there was great hope and optimism that China was ready to join the international rules-based order. But in the past year, Canadians in particular have learned firsthand how justice in China works. The Meng Wanzhou extradition case has caused much grief in many ways, but has been illuminating in others. After the arbitrary detention of Canadians Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor, we should no longer harbor any illusions about China's attitude towards the rule of law. And we have known all of this for some time, yet for many years we looked the other way, as the allure of China's market was too powerful to ignore. However, so long as China is willing to hold our exports hostage, all while committing human rights violations, we have no choice as Canadians but to consider other trading partners. Unfortunately, we have alternatives, like-minded democracies in the Indo-Pacific region, for example, some of which desperately need more secure access to energy, are ideal economic and political partners for Canada. A community of free democracies all over the world, in Europe, in the Indo-Pacific, and everywhere in between, united to resist the forces of authoritarianism, built through Canadian leadership. That should be our goal. That will have a deeply consequential impact on global history. At any rate, Canada's relationship with China needs a total reset, and nothing can happen until such time. Although China is a primary and certainly the strongest propagator of authoritarian values, Russia also remains a very serious threat. Vladimir Putin cannot be allowed to act with impunity when it comes to his military adventurism. While today he is occupying Ukraine, tomorrow it could be Canada's Arctic waters. But it isn't just in Ukraine where Vladimir Putin has reasserted Russia's Cold War posture. Russia has supported Iran, and together they have been the main sources of disruption and despair in the Middle East. Putin has been forthright when it comes to propping up Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And along with Putin, the Iranian regime must be held accountable for its state-sanctioned sponsorship of terror and the constant threat it poses to its own people, its neighbors, and to Israel, Canada's foremost friend in the Middle East. And I've been so inspired by the courage of the Iranian people, who have continuously shown a willingness to stand up to their own government. Canada must do all we can to ensure that the people of Iran soon enjoy the same freedoms that we enjoy, that they are successful in ridding the world of the evil that their government represents. To stand up for pluralism and democracy, Canada must renew our support for Israel and its inherent right to defend itself. Terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah have absolutely no interest in peace. And since their inception, the leaders of Hamas have been trying to destroy Israel. When Israel gives them the concrete they need to build hospitals and schools, Hamas instead builds tunnels to kill civilians. When the world gives Hamas money to feed the Palestinian people, Hamas buys rockets to indiscriminately target Israelis. The reality of the Middle East is this: if Israel's enemies were to lay down their arms tomorrow, there would be peace. If Israel were to lay down its arms, there would be no more Israel. And this is why it is disappointing to me that the current government has abandoned Canada's principled support for Israel in abstaining in key votes in the United Nations. When Israel's borders came under attack from Hamas terrorists, as they have in recent days, Canada must support Israel's right to defend itself and recognize Hamas's direct responsibility in inciting violence and the loss of life. Canada must be ready and reliable when Israel needs to count on their democratic friend and ally. And I want to be very clear as well that under my leadership, extending a hand of friendship to the Palestinian people will be a priority. The Palestinian people want the same things that all people want: freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And this will come not through incitement to violence, but through peaceful negotiations. And I do not believe that giving money to highly flawed organizations like UNRWA advances the cause of peace or partnership. And the Palestinian people are denied democracy, not by Israel, but by their own government. If the values of pluralism, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are to prevail, it is time once again for the free-speaking and democratic peoples of the world to reinvigorate old alliances and build new ones. Alliances with other free democracies and with peoples who are seeking democracy. Canada can, and we will find common cause and ensure that freedom prevails in this century just as it did in the past. Pour jouer le rôle que nous devons jouer dans ce monde nouveau, nous devons recommencer par rétablir les relations entre le Canada et les États-Unis. Il ne fait aucun doute que les relations avec l'administration en place sont difficiles pour tous les dirigeants du monde. Le président actuel renverse des décennies de politique étrangère américaine bien établie, surtout en ce qui a trait aux alliances. Néanmoins, les relations entre le Canada et les États-Unis vont perdurer. Nous ne pouvons pas laisser la personnalité tromper les liens entre nos deux pays. Trop souvent, Justin Trudeau fait passer des objectifs politiques partisans avant cette relation dont dépendent tant d'emplois canadiens. Sur l'ALENA, l'intention déclarée du président Trump d'obtenir la meilleure entente pour les Américains n'a pas rencontré une force et une résolution égale de la part du Canada. Au lieu de cela, le gouvernement actuel a fait la leçon au président américain sur des enjeux qui n'ont rien à voir avec le commerce. Il ne l'a pas fait pour le bien du Canada ou des Canadiens, mais pour redorer son image et gagner des points ici au pays. Between NAFTA, withdrawing from the ISIS campaign, purchasing used jets rather than new jets, refusing to join the ballistic missile defense program, abstaining on key votes at the UN, repealing Iran sanctions, and closer alignment with China, the current government has fostered tension and mistrust between what should be the world's two greatest allies. Our posture in relation to the Americans must be to seriously and strongly defend our interests and to make the case for strengthened partnership among free democracies. Je suis très fier du rôle que des premiers ministres conservateurs canadiens ont joué dans le développement de la francophonie internationale. Brian Mulroney, en particulier, a rendu possible, avec le président François Mitterrand, la réunion à tous les 2 ans des pays francophones. Notre participation à la francophonie, comme d'ailleurs au Commonwealth, nous permet de faire valoir notre engagement en faveur de la paix, de la démocratie, de l'égalité et des droits de la personne. Le gouvernement Mulroney a aussi consacré le caractère privilégié des relations du Canada avec la France, une de nos deux mères patries. Notre gouvernement a reconnu que les Québécois forment une nation au sein du Canada. Et nous avons aussi donné vie à ce principe, y compris sur la scène internationale. Le Premier ministre Stephen Harper a notamment permis au Québec de participer pleinement aux travaux de l'UNESCO. Et j'ai l'intention d'affirmer à mon tour l'engagement de notre pays auprès de la francophonie mondiale. En tant que Premier ministre, je vais travailler avec les pays membres sur un défi contemporain important auquel fait face la francophonie mondiale et les pays qui y participent, soit le manque de coordination économique. Les pays francophones forment un potentiel de richesse incroyable, de par les ressources humaines et naturelles dont ils disposent. Il est nécessaire, donc, que ces pays se recentrent sur l'un des objectifs historiques phares de la francophonie mondiale, initié il y a plusieurs décennies de manière institutionnelle. Il s'agit du développement économique et des échanges commerciaux des membres de l'OIF. Now, when we talk about uniting the world's democracy, when we talk about trade, particularly free trade, has to be at the center of our approach. No other party in Canada has as strong a record on the protection and promotion of free trade than Canada's Conservatives. It was Prime Minister Brian Mulroney who initiated free trade with the United States, initiated NAFTA, and delivered the incredible prosperity that followed. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper initiated and concluded free trade negotiations with over 50 countries. Economic freedom, the freedom to choose, to buy and sell freely, the freedom to succeed or fail based on those choices has been essential to our national success and prosperity and to the success of like-minded partners. The benefits of free trade are obvious. Aside from the economic prosperity that follows when people are allowed to exchange freely, it is a simple fact that free trading nations don't go to war with each other. But free trade cannot come without trust. Free trade with countries like China will only be possible when China embraces a functioning rule of law system, when judicial processes which are supposed to guarantee equal market access are no longer subject to control by the government. It's critical to note that we bled and died alongside Americans during 2 world wars and in Korea, and stood shoulder to shoulder with them against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And it still took decades before a free trade agreement was ever signed. First comes trust, then comes trade. We may yet get there with China, but given the events of the last few months, it's clear that we are a long ways off. If Canada is going to truly make a difference, we also have to bring more to the table. Having a principled foreign policy is meaningless if you don't have a strong and agile defense policy to back that up. And to that end, we must renew our support for the Canadian Armed Forces. As Prime Minister, I will never forget that ours is the nation that bravely conquered Vimy Ridge, that made the ultimate sacrifice on Juno Beach, that held the line at the Battle of Kapyong in Korea, and helped deliver the people of Afghanistan from the Taliban. The sacrifices made then by so many Canadians and our allies gifted us the modern world we all too often take for granted. And that is why I believe those who seek to lead this great nation need to be frank and open about the threats we face, the challenges we must overcome, and articulate a plan of how to do that. The serving men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces are the best in the world at what they do, but they are often underserved. While successive governments have promised improvements, sometimes domestic politics and the political cycle get in the way of delivering for our troops. As a country, we must acquire the capabilities that are needed to protect Canada while contributing to global peace and security in the decades ahead. Military procurement in Canada is hyper-politicized to our detriment. In the United States and Australia, as just 2 examples, there is greater consensus when it comes to the national defense, and at the end of the day, big projects are allowed to move forward. That is not the case in Canada. By playing politics with these matters, political parties have diminished the important responsibility to adequately and expediently equip the armed forces. Further, to address the increasing threat to our Arctic sovereignty posed by Russia, China, and others, we must reinforce Canada's standing as a maritime nation. Compte tenu de l'état et des besoins de la marine et de la garde côtière canadienne, il n'y a aucune raison que les chantiers navals du Canada soient inactifs. Je ne vais pas annuler les contrats alloués, mais je crois qu'il faut apporter des améliorations, surtout à Ottawa, à la gestion de ces projets. Les emplois de nos chantiers navals dépendent de nous. Et quand on parle des menaces pour le Canada, nous ne pouvons pas ignorer le cyberspace. Les menaces de demain vont certainement provenir de nos appareils électroniques, pas seulement de la terre, des eaux ou des airs. Le Canada doit être prêt à contrer ces menaces. Nous devons augmenter notre capacité de cyberguerre et les capacités de piratage et de blocage de nos adversaires peuvent aisément détruire nos réseaux de communication et rendre le commandement et le contrôle quasi impossible. Bien qu'une attaque de cette ampleur soit le pire des scénarios, nous devons être prêts à toutes les éventualités. The Canadian Armed Forces must adapt to the changing realities of cyber warfare, particularly in terms of its personnel and organization. Canada already has a world-class tech sector, especially when it comes to cybersecurity, but it is often untapped. Canada must act to get industry and government on the same page when it comes to protecting Canada's information technology infrastructure. We must modernize cyber procurement in Canada and better align the capabilities of our industry to meet global demand. Now, as Prime Minister, I intend to be forthright with Canadians about the threats we face. I will reinvigorate Canada's role in the alliances we share with our democratic allies. This includes existing alliances like NORAD, NATO, the Commonwealth, La Francophonie, and the Five Eyes. But it will also include greater overtures to India and Japan. I will find a way for Canada to be relevant factors in the domestic affairs of our allies in a world where the sentiments of self-interest are on the rise. We see this happening in many, many countries where domestic political movements force a change in that country's foreign policy with a greater focus on that country's own self-interest. So Canada must do everything we can to factor in even more in that domestic calculation. We have to be as important as ever before to ensure that our allies are with us when we face challenges around the world. We also have to fight against the growing sentiment of protectionism that comes along with some of these movements. And I will reject that sense of putting up trade barriers and relentlessly pursue new efforts to increase trade and find new markets for Canadian goods in fast-growing economies like those found in Asia. I've already begun this important work with trade missions to India and the United Kingdom in the last 18 months. And I will also work with all parties in Parliament to depoliticize the military procurement process so that Canada isn't empty-handed when called upon. My vision for military procurement in Canada is to depoliticize it in such a way that all parties in the House of Commons have greater say on the front end of the decision-making process so that there can be greater ownership of the final result. That way, big ticket items that our armed forces genuinely need aren't subject to some of the political football games that happen during election times. I will also deal with China with eyes wide open. I will look for ways to strengthen our relationships and open new markets, but with the understanding that at this critical juncture, we need to show strength and resolve above all else. If this government isn't willing to stand up to China when 2 Canadians are unlawfully imprisoned and billions of dollars in trade is under attack, it never will. My goal is better relations. My goal is more economic opportunity, but that can only come after we make a stand, and I will. As Prime Minister, I will end Canada's $256 million investment in the Chinese-controlled Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and launch a formal complaint at the World Trade Organization if their trade blockades persist. I will not allow Chinese state-owned enterprises solely focused on the political interests of Beijing unfettered access to the Canadian market. I will also renew Canada's historic support for Ukraine and take steps to help Ukraine secure its borders and defend its people. This will include expanding upon current missions to support Ukraine and providing Ukraine's military with the equipment they need to defend their borders. I will also push for Canadian leadership in a United Nations peacekeeping mission to secure those borders. I will immediately act to list Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity, as well as make full use of the Magnitsky Law to punish Iran's worst human rights offenders. I will reopen the Office of Religious Freedom to stand up for religious minorities all around the world, and I will recognize the fact that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Finally, I will make sure Canada provides a counterbalance to Russia and China's burgeoning icebreaker fleets. While Russia and China are both developing and deploying nuclear icebreakers to patrol the Arctic, Canadian capacity is severely lacking. I will do more, a lot more, to show that we are an Arctic power. Above all, we must establish, without a doubt, everywhere in the world, that our sovereignty over the North is non-negotiable. The Arctic does not only belong to us, it is us, and that includes the Northwest Passage. I will build on the Canada-US tradition of joint military partnerships by starting talks with the Americans to join the Ballistic Missile Defense Program and modernize the NORAD alliance. I will act to select a new fighter jet through an open competition and to make sure that the new jets are interoperable with our American allies. The Canada-United States relationship transcends the personalities of those who occupy each respective office, and its longevity is crucial to our respective peace and prosperity. So it must be strengthened and renewed. I will also begin the process of upgrading the Royal Canadian Navy's submarine capability. The Australian government has initiated a multi-year strategy to procure its future submarine capability, and Canada can look to these and other international models as we seek to ensure that we also have the capabilities that are necessary to effectively protect our national waters. Pour terminer, permettez-moi de dire que nous vivons dans un monde turbulent. C'est un fait que nous ignorons à nos risques et périls, mais il ne fait aucun doute que notre pays est prêt à relever tous les défis comme nous le faisons depuis plus de 150 ans. Je sais que j'ai soulevé de nombreux sujets aujourd'hui. Je veux bien faire comprendre que tout ce que j'ai dit aujourd'hui ne représente nullement la totalité de ce que sera ma politique étrangère. Je suis fier du bilan de notre parti sur l'accueil des réfugiés, sur la défense des droits de personnes LGBTQ qui font l'objet de discrimination par des régimes oppressifs, et sur les réalisations pour aider les femmes et les enfants par des programmes comme l'initiative de l'ancien gouvernement conservateur sur la santé des mères, des nouveau-nés et des enfants, ainsi que le travail sur l'égalité des genres. Ces efforts vont continuer sur mon gouvernement. It's quite clear that when Canada uses its development capabilities, its programs to assist with international development, that when we align those with our Canadian domestic values, like on the subject of protecting religious minorities, ensuring the equality of women and girls, that not only do we get better results for that country, but we also contribute greatly to global peace and security. Et j'aurai plus à dire sur la façon dont le Canada abordera les problèmes mondiaux complexes des changements climatiques et des migrations humaines. D'une manière générale, je suis convaincu que quand le Canada exporte les principes de la liberté économique, de la liberté d'expression, de la liberté de la presse, nous créons de meilleures possibilités pour tous les peuples du monde. Nous avons énormément de chance en tant que Canadiens d'avoir hérité des traditions et des institutions indépendantes qui font du Canada le meilleur pays du monde. Nous ne devrions pas avoir honte de défendre et de nous battre pour ce en quoi nous croyons. In 1943, Winston Churchill came to this very province to meet with Canada's allies, and he said, quote, "Here at the gateway of Canada, in mighty lands which have never known the totalitarian tyrannies of Hitler and Mussolini, the spirit of freedom has found a safe and abiding home." I believe this spirit of freedom is inherent to all human beings. Rights are not created by government. Government only recognizes rights, or it fails to. When governments believe that human rights are merely political creations, the results are painful and inevitable. The innermost wants, needs, and even thoughts of vulnerable individuals are suppressed by force. In the 20th century, liberty was confronted by the poisonous ideologies of communism and fascism. In the 21st century, while the threats to liberty may go by different names, they are no less insidious. C'est pourquoi je crois fondamentalement que nous devons être honnêtes avec nous-mêmes sur les menaces auxquelles nous faisons face. C'est pourquoi nous devons unir les forces de la démocratie et de la liberté dans le monde entier pour confronter les menaces avec une résolution plus ferme que ceux qui les posent. Et nous devons être prêts à faire notre part, à soutenir la force de nos valeurs avec la valeur de nos forces. Ce que j'ai dit aujourd'hui n'est que le début. J'aurai plus à révéler sur le rôle international du Canada au cours des prochains mois, mais ce sera le phare de ma politique étrangère. Assurer un Canada plus fort dans un monde turbulent. car c'est seulement quand notre nation est forte que nos valeurs triomphent. Nous devrions montrer au reste du monde que nous sommes toujours un pays, non seulement de principes, mais d'action, et que nous sommes prêts à rester aux côtés de nos alliés pour assurer un avenir encore plus pacifique et prospère que le présent que nous créons aujourd'hui. À cette fin, un nouveau gouvernement conservateur va redéfinir nos alliances et nos partenariats internationaux selon l'ordre mondial toujours changeant. Nous allons clairement et honnêtement identifier les menaces auxquelles les Canadiens font face et nous allons renouveler notre souveraineté pour une défense nationale revitalisée, pour que le Canada soit prêt quand il est appelé et capable de se défendre avec vigueur. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.